Hello, everyone. Welcome. Happy Wednesday. I'm Manuela Contreras, and I am so excited for you to join me here on Wisdom Wednesdays presented by Fuerza Experiences. I am going to do a quick check to make sure that we are live on all the spaces. And as you get settled in, I want to invite you to do a bit of movement and breathing with me for us to be fully present during our time today. So thank you once again. I want to encourage you to just get settled in your seat, get settled wherever you are, standing and safely be able to take a moment for yourself, to thank yourself for being here. I want to invite you to take a deep breath in through your nose and then release. Strong breath out through your mouth. Once again, breathe in through your nose and release strongly through your mouth. Last time, breathing in through your nose and a strong release out through your mouth. Create some movement in your body. Move your neck to the side, to the other side, and do a small rotation around. Look to the right side over your right shoulder, and then look to the left side. And then just shake a little, move your body, and ground yourself in being here. On these very busy days, I understand that taking some time to fully be present can be challenging, but if you can, I highly encourage you to join us because this is going to be such a rich conversation. So I want to start off by once again introducing myself. I am Manuela Contreras, she, her, ella, founder and chief inspiration officer of Fuerza Experiences. I am a Latina. I have brown hair, brown eyes. I am wearing glasses, gold hoops, and a sapphire gold necklace with a fuchsia silk blouse. And I am sitting behind a virtual background with eucalyptus green and gold branches and the symbols of the Fuerza Experiences logo and our Wisdom Wednesday hashtag. And I want to share a little bit about our vision for being here and our intention for why we are here today. Fuerza, our vision is for us to exist in a world where leaders can live in harmony, doing the meaningful work that are deeply passionate about while also preserving their well-being. Fuerza believes that we can do this and live in harmony while loving ourselves, mind, body, and spirit. As an alignment coach and strategic consultant, I work with leaders, solo entrepreneurs, and small business owners to also think intentionally about how we do the work, how our systems, beliefs, and actions allow us to align ourselves to our values while also taking care of ourselves along the work to create meaningful long-term impact in our community. The intention for Wisdom Wednesday aims to normalize these nurturing conversations that not only prioritize what our purpose is, but also our well-being, so we can think about the impact we want to create in our community. I hope these conversations help to inspire you to think differently about the work we are excited about. And in a world that values the written word above everything, these conversations are deeply intended to honor our heritage ancestors who have shared wisdom through storytelling, through idea exchanges. For learners that grow by doing, by listening, by visualizing, this space is for you. So thank you so much for joining. If you have any needs in terms of accessibility or different types of needs during our conversation today, LinkedIn allows you to connect to the closed captioning on the right-hand side of your screen. So please turn those on if that is supportive to you. And if you need additional support throughout the call, feel free to message me and I would love to accommodate for you. I enjoy taking notes throughout our conversation. So if I'm looking down, please know that it is yes, Satonya as well, that it is a fully trying to capture the work that we're doing here today. We love your questions and encourage them. So if you share and want to share with us, feel free to use the comment section below of the LinkedIn Live page. And as always, I always ask for love and grace as we are live in our virtual homes and we do not know what may happen. So if we hear some noises, my Benny that may pop in, I ask for that grace. And lastly, today's session is very much about bringing two wonderful people together to share perspectives and ground us in this work. However, neither of us are mental health professionals, and none of the work that we talk here are to be around creating a one-size-fits-all. All of this is to encourage deeper reflection and to bring in different perspectives so you can find work and perspectives, beliefs, and practices that work for you. So thank you for being here once again. Before we get started, I want to ground us in this beautiful quote that was coming up as I was preparing for our conversation today. One of my favorite podcasts that had got me through the pandemic and has brought me to here is the Good Ancestor podcast. And when they were interviewing Tracy Hershey from the NAP ministry yesterday, as I was listening to it, she said something that was so powerful that I think can be really grounding for us today. And she said, on our next level of liberation is waiting for us in a slowed down state, is waiting for us in a dream, is waiting for us in a nap, is waiting for us while we're listening to the stars, listening to the birds. The earth is not going to come to us in an urgent, exhausted, burnt out manner. It's the lie we've been told is that the more we go, the more we do, the quicker we get there, but it's actually the opposite. So we are here today, joined by Satonya Fair, CEO and President of PEAK Grantmaking, and we are going to talk about this, rest and sabbatical, and their wonderful path to radical wellness. So welcome, Satonya. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's an honor and a joy. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, to tell us a little bit about your journey, what has brought you here, what called you to this conversation, and how does well-being play a role in your personal and professional life?
So I'll take those one at a time. So I am Satonya Fair, and I'm a girl from Akron, Ohio, who found my way to the East Coast in Baltimore, a place where I still live. And I am a Black woman. I have black, dark brown, blackish hair with some grays. They're coming in there. And today I'm wearing a white blouse. I'm wearing an ankh that was given to me from Ghana, and black earrings, big flowers with some gold. And I'm sitting in my wonderful home office. And today is actually the day that many of us remember being sent home in 2020. I just want to name that March 13th was a big day. And so that was the day where I had to turn my house into an office. Like many others in the world. And so now I have found and have made my space. So I'm in a room with soft grays, lots of golds, and it is surrounded by artwork from my family and things that mean a lot to me. And so that is where I am today. I find myself coming to today, having spent most of my journey professionally working equally between nonprofits and funder spaces. And from law school to being a direct service provider and case manager to today at PEAK Grantmaking, I think I have always been very fascinated with the story of people and how our lives get intersected by things outside of our control, and how systems, people, good-hearted community can come together and really change and impact for the positive people and lives. And so I come here now just loving PEAK Grantmaking, feeling very honored to be part of this organization after more than 10 years as a volunteer and supporter of the work that the organization was doing. And I find myself in this conversation. I hope that everybody understands everything I do is about being a practitioner. I have expertise, I have certifications, I have degrees, but I count myself a practitioner of things. So I appreciated your statement at the beginning that we're not experts in this, but I do think that practice is the key. Wellness has not always been my journey. And so I think that's why I was also very interested in coming into this conversation, as PEAK is early in this journey as an organization. And I would say I'm probably way late in getting to this place as a professional who's now 53 years old. So that is how I come to be here. I am a very different person than I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And so I'm excited to share some stories with you on my journey to now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for starting us off with that truth is that, so many of us, we love to see that end place of when we have done it all, or we are really embodying the practices. But this is such a journey, and it takes a while, takes so many steps. And the biggest lesson that I've learned this year too is the healing journey that is cyclical, and that we are constantly being reintroduced with these same situations or moments of fear, or moments of being activated, and that it's the intentional everyday decisions to want to continue to engage in that and allow ourselves to say it's normal, that maybe if it did take us 10, 20, 30, 50, 60 years, 80 years to get into that place of, oh, now this is what is serving me, that is also okay. And all of these stages, there's deep wisdom in each of these stages. So I'm very excited for us to share about that. So thank you for acknowledging the early stages that you're in as PEAK, as an organization, and how y'all have started to embody this work. I had the privilege to speak to one of your staff members, so I do want to highlight what she shared with me when I was talking to her about her experiences with PEAK. And she said, being part of PEAK has been an incredible experience. I appreciate that PEAK focuses on people and encourages self-care practices. I make sure to take some time every day to meditate, walk, journal, complete a page in my FBI word search puzzle. One of the things that I appreciate the most about PEAK is that we work as a team, and it feels more like a family. So Dion Thompson, thank you so much for sharing that. Grateful for you to want to share your insight and your reflections of being at PEAK. And so now let's uncover that, Satonya. What has led you? How did you get here? What inspired PEAK to want to go on this journey and create these spaces for Dion and other staff members at PEAK?
Well, I am going to say that the leadership of the organization, my predecessor, did so much work to really move PEAK into a place and space that was a staffed organization, professional staffed organization, to run a very busy association. I think it's people who haven't done it don't understand that, starting with like that working board and no staff, and then being the first staff member, and then finally raising enough money to bring people in. You are building. And so I just want to acknowledge Michelle Greenius, the executive director for PEAK, the only one before me. There's so much work in trying to get an organization to be functional, financially sound. I got to come in and think about where PEAK was going. I think that the board positioned the hiring process very well to think about the journey ahead. Where is PEAK going to be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? And trying to find a leader who could think outside the box, and maybe even outside the nonprofit box. And they chose me. And if they probably are still like scratching their heads on that, But I have been coming into this journey not having all the language that I have now, but definitely understanding as I came into Peak that I didn't like the way nonprofits are treated. I didn't like the very familiar productivity lens that gets cast on people who work at nonprofits. People are often not seen and valued for their skill sets and experience, even though we have these job responsibilities that require all kinds of experience to come and work at an organization that is a national nonprofit like Peak. Um, and so I just probably walked in the door realizing that if I followed some of the models that had been laid before me, I would be missing a golden opportunity as a Black woman leading this nonprofit at this time. And so Peak has always been a disruptor. I think we've always challenged this is the way we've always done it thinking. We've been building bridges with finance and IT and investment folks to really be able to say, you don't have to take on big work of moving money alone. It's a group project. The whole organization has to be in it to win it. And then to just come in and say, are we going to continue to be understaffed, underpaid, and work like dogs? Like, really? Even the board said to me, and I hope that no one who listens to this is upset that I'm repeating it, but they said, you have one main challenge when you start. And this was, I was interviewing in March of 2020. So let's just think about that. Started as as an interim CEO consulting, while I ended my other job and then began this job in August. But one of the things that the board said to me was that with all your skills and experience, there's one thing you have to do and have to be willing to do. And I said, well, what's that? I know the organization so well. So I was like, leaning in on that conversation. And they said, you got to pick the staff up from the floor. They've been working so hard, and someone's got to go take care of them. And that was what the board said to me. I think the staff, in their own words during the interview process, talked about how Peak needed to be a different place to work. And we hadn't retained staff for more than a couple years, other than the ED. Most people had come in and come out, and we had noticed that revolving door. And so it was a ripe space and place for me to come in and rethink what was possible. I had a colleague, a friend who happened to be the COO, who had been generating what I would call the longest parking lot on health, wellness, and benefits I've ever seen, and not been given, because of the pandemic and all of the turmoil that came between choosing a new CEO and. She had managed through a lot of things, but she hadn't thrown her list away. She had kept, along with the staff, the organization afloat through a difficult time. And at a certain point, I got to see her list, and her list resonated with how I was feeling people needed to be at work. And so between her parking lot, or her unicorn list, as she would say, a unicorn bucket, and my aspiration on being a different type of Black woman leading in this moment, we were able to really sit with staff and say, we have some ideas, and here's what we're thinking. And I sat with the board and I said, we've got to pay competitively, and we need a lot more people to support this amazing growing community. And you can't get to equity if people are literally broken down at the end of the year, every year, because they have just been taxed beyond their means. And so it just called for a lot of shift. And so we were honest, we talked a lot as a board, as a staff, as individuals, and then we got going.
Wow. There's just so much richness. I don't even know if we're going to have enough time today to talk about all of this. But there's a few things I really want to highlight that you said that I love. One, around the piece, the very real realities of, you said, I knew that if I followed the same models before me, I would lose an opportunity for gold. We are so quick to, and again, very normal for us to go to a place that's comfortable, that what we know, because we think that that will be the most supportive way to move forward. And in reality, when we continue to perpetuate practices that we're not centered and grounded in what is truly best for us, that is such a loss. And it shows that because that was such a deep intention for you going into it, the place that it has brought you. And what you are saying here, I love this. You cannot get to equity when people are broken down. You talked a lot about the real honest reality of the shifts, the belief systems that, not only as individual leaders, we need to feel to say, I am not going to just do what has been done before. I want to do something differently. But also the very real reality of the people in your organization. When you're in that place of being deeply broken down, it's sometimes hard to know that you're worthy of an organization as though you're speaking of. How many times have we been in circumstances where, leaders have told us, I want to do this, and you get very excited, and for whatever reason, it cannot show. So I would love to talk about that a little bit, of when you were really talking to your community and you were thinking about what is it that your stakeholders, what were those conversations that you think really needed to have in order to create that shift, that this is possible and we can move forward in this, and how to get what it sounds like it wasn't just about you leading, but really bringing folks forward and saying, we are leading this work?
Well, I've always believed that I have to model, right? Even when I was in environments that were much less interested in my health, wellness, or success, I've always felt like I, as just a person, needed to be a good model. And if you think about it, it's like peak is existing in the world of philanthropy, the social sector. When I think philanthropy, I don't just think funder, I think about the nonprofits and community, because you can have a lot of money, but the nonprofits are bringing expertise on the ground, and community is being impacted and influencing, because they should be first to be asked, what do you need? And so when I think about the ecosystem, so I'll just refer to the philanthropic ecosystem, when I think about that, there have been a lot of declarations around equity, around health, around justice for many foundations, right? And it has made them go on their own journey. And these are foundations, private foundations, who are sitting on endowments with resources, with staff, and there's more flexibility for them to think about, what does it look like for them? I hadn't seen a ton of foundations really thinking about not themselves, but really, what about our nonprofits? And looking at the profile of the typical nonprofit that they fund. And I think oftentimes when you begin to say, okay, we're putting out 25 grants a year in this community, who are our grantees? Looking at their budget size, looking at how many staff they have, how much money they have and assets, and flexibility, like, do they have flexible funding? Most organizations are, as we know, 1.3 million of the 1.9 nonprofits have a budget of $50,000 or less. Well, when America is telling you that a family of four is now at about $70,000, and you have an entire organization, 1.3 million of them, operating less than 50,000, you may have a lot of opinions about whether they should exist. It's irrelevant. It's about the data. And when you go into the data of the up to 50, the 250, and then that next tranche up to 500,000 in assets, these staffs are small. They're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. And so I found it very fascinating that trying to make sure that a nonprofit has wellness is a very different goal. And there are some amazing foundations where that is their goal. And it's beautiful to watch them work. And I've actually given you some resources that reflect some of those folks that are really investing in wellness, investing in leadership, sabbaticals, those types of things at nonprofits. But the list is about this long. It's not the 130,000 foundations that we look to and that we survey. And so I'll just say that as we kind of thought about, what is possible, I just was fascinated, as well as I think driven, to say, what does it look like to do some things that we don't always announce publicly? Like, of course, our board knows, our staff knows, like our key champions knew, we're going to go on this journey and we're going to change this. And once we got the support of the staff and the board, like the board saying, go, hire more people, pay them more, think about these things. I mean, this is a big deal. It's usually a barrier. Peak didn't have that barrier because so many people on our board are the practitioner who are not seen at their own organizations. And they know what it's like to work like 12, 14-hour days and not always be seen. So I think we had the right group of people at the right time. And I've been thinking about Peak just as a model. What does it mean for not just nonprofits to look to other nonprofits as a model, but for foundations to see an organization thriving and doing things differently, and they think to themselves, we could do that. And so Peak has really set out through a lot of both experimentation, picking up on trends that have been going on in many other places for a long time, but we've sought to use ourselves and our internal shift as a model to the community, anybody paying attention to the ecosystem of what can't be. And so it's been a real process to think about that. But we must all stand in the space of wanting to be a model and also being humble enough to be influenced. Because I think those are two things that are really important. The community is watching a foundation, and the community is also paying attention to the nonprofits, and they're looking at the power differential there. And so also the other spaces, how does Peak still, as a not small organization, how does the Peak staff show up like really like strong back, strong, hard, con fuerza, right? How do we show up where you can tell that we're getting poured into a bit in order to do this work? And we have each other. To Dion's comment, what does that look like? I think that people began to notice pretty quickly that the people that they knew back in 2018 and 2019 seemed a little different for those that were sticking around. And that has been a beautiful thing to hear people report back to me, this transformation that they've seen in the individuals. And that is like, and it's their transformation. I will take no credit for that. People have to go on their own journey, and they have to accept and embrace what is around them in order for it to be a real experience. But it's been really nice to hear people who've been around Peak for more than 20 years talk about the shifts they see. And that right there is not what a normal foundation would ask me in my report, but it to me is the impact.
That's beautiful. And this is something important to really highlight what you're saying, Satonya, is around how important it is for there to be a culture in an organization that is doing this work. But there is also the balance that the individual leader needs to own their responsibility in this journey and work as well. Is that you work on creating the CEOs, the CEOs, the leadership can work really hard to create that space. But we always have to have our own ownership and saying, okay, but I'm going to take advantage of it. I'm going to use this work. I'm going to use those hours that I'm going to take those mental health days or those sick leaves because, and what is the individual work we each need to do to make sure that we acknowledge that this is, again, we are worthy of this. We are worthy of taking that one day off every, 4 to 6 weeks. I had a coach, a leader that I worked with that said that, and she advised, she said, make sure that every, 5 to 6 weeks, you take a one day off for yourself, not a weekend, but a weekday fully off for yourself. And just take it and put that in, create that expectation, create that boundaries with your team. Watch how that shifts. Watch that, how you just giving yourself that scheduled time off and set every couple weeks, what that does for you. And these can feel very simple, but we have to own that for ourselves. What would that look like for you? Does it look like doing a morning movement class, once or twice a week? Does it look like separating out and doing a puzzle, an FBI word puzzle like Dion had shared? But what that means for you, you need to decide that, and then use the resources that organizations provide. And there's also something to say that we're not all that fortunate. We're not all fortunate to receive that level of support. And so I want to touch a bit on what we had taught, what you were mentioning is around when you were privileged to have the conversation, you were privileged to have the board members that was very supportive and situated for that. But what were, did you have, or for leaders or CEOs that want to also do this work and have to have very difficult conversations with their stakeholders, that being either their board members, their fellow executive leaders, or even their staff. Do you have light to share to that of folks that may have to have very difficult conversations with people that may not be in alignment to this work? How to bring them forward to explore what this could be?
Yeah, I think that I have a few different things. Not everyone was as excited about when we started announcing, half day Fridays and, and that we were going to be announcing. I'll just say, I have the support of the board to run the organization on a daily basis. We're 28 years old too. We're not new. There are a lot of early nonprofits where the board hand is a heavier hand on purpose because it needs to be, because you do not have all the staff capacity and things that you need to really run the organization. I think PEAK also, this is possibly because probably where PEAK is in the journey and the arc as well, having adopted equity forward mission and vision back in 2019 to really have thought deeply about whether we are living our own principles. We have 5 principles that dictate our work, and 2 of them are narrow power gaps and tie your practices to your values. To me, the tie practices to your values and drive equity, that was really about, is that out there or is that everywhere? Because I do think that the tendency to say, oh, I want to make sure that you and I feel like equals. It's like, yeah, but how about me and my partner at home? How do we feel? And so there's a level of internal work that has to be done. I definitely know that some board members, that was a challenge for them. Their organizations are not there. Many of them, again, being at smaller or larger organizations, trying to find their own path and space and place. It was like, what are you going to do? I will say that they were supportive, but there were a lot of questions. And I do think that there's a level of both transparency and forwardness that we should bring to these conversations. I'm not doing anything in hiding at PEAK Grantmaking, right? One, because it's a nonprofit, we swear to abide by transparency radically. At least at PEAK we do. And so, no, we wanted everybody in on it. We were asking people, we were focus grouping, we had some peer spaces that came together. And it was interesting, not that I'm jumping around, but we've done a GM 101, Grants Management 101 for years. It has different components of the conversation. The one that is always rated the highest is when we talk about career and like career advancement, professional advancement, career development, which of course touches on wellness and being, right? That's always the highest rated. It's not compliance, it's not foundation structures, it's none of that. It's always when we get into like thinking about how am I navigating in this world successfully in a good way, in a way that will keep me whole and hearty for the work ahead. That's when it really gets real. And I think a lot of our peer spaces and affinity spaces, so much of what we were talking about was not, expenditure responsibilities at a private foundation. We were asking, are you okay? We were asking, do you need my support? Do you have what you need in your career? Those were the conversations. And so I just think that it's important to sit down and just have your plan and have your aspiration. We did not go to the board and say, what do you think about us going toward wellness? What we did was presented a plan and a budget and all the things. We brought in coaching to the organization. Every staff member at PEAK has the advantage of working with Radical Spark Coaching. Jackie Sergi, who's there, she's amazing. She's taken us on as a transformational client to really provide a level of leadership and executive coaching to every level of staff when we need it. And that's an investment. And so I think that we had a plan, we had dollars, we kind of laid out what could be possible, where we wanted our board to really focus their component of giving that they drive each year, which we really wanted focused on our wellness and our professional and career development. We could raise money for many other things, but we wanted the board's intentionality and thinking about that bar that we set for them on fundraising as being internally focused, and they took it on. And so I do think you have to have a very good plan, have your why, right? Because if you have your why, and your why is that I want Manuela to be happy, healthy, and whole working at PEAK Grantmaking, who's going to argue with that? And those who do, they are outed very quickly as being like, maybe not in the right field. And so have a plan. I think the what do you thinks, we probably shouldn't ask the board that ever. I think we should have really good questions for the board so that they can respond to us in a way that is filling gaps, that's really giving us a little bit more feedback. And so PEAK had a plan. We created a plan. We continue to morph that plan to listen deeply to our staff about what's working. You just think about it. If you give people like unlimited wellness and a sabbatical, or you give them a lot of vacation, but then you close for wellness breaks, there's a lot of tension that gets created because people are thinking, gosh, how do I do this and do my job? And so it's not all simple, like, oh, we're just throwing great things at the staff and everything's going well. It's planful. You use the word intentional and you use the word alignment. And so going back to Dion and team, you can't do this without team. So when I had a team of 1 or 2 people, you understood, I had to kind of say, how do I tell them to go take a break when they know that nobody else is doing the work? That when they come back, it's all just sitting there because we didn't have enough bench strength. And so the march from 11 to 22 and 22 plus had to happen because you just can't get to it. You cannot realistically tell someone to take a break if they have no one at work who can take on that opportunity. So cross training, like kind of cross integration, trying to bring down silos at work. So there was much more coordination and communication. But this is all internal, Manuela. It's all shifts, internal policy shifts, growth, thinking about the dollars, thinking about your employee manual, everything had to shift. And so what we did was we just kept previewing it with the board. So we get to a place and we would put a hyperlink in their board brief every month and go like, well, look at where we are. And then we started to hear from the board, like asking us questions like, oh, wait, we're talking about that at our foundation. Can we talk with you about that? And we noticed that when we went out into community, the whole staff, because we all represent PEAK in different capacities, people were asking about our principles, people were asking about our resources, and people were asking about wellness. And I was like, oh, again, this is it. We're on to something that people are looking at both sides of what PEAK is bringing to the table. People are asking us about career, not just how do you get the grants out the door. And so it has become like a beautiful, it's almost like self-perpetuating where we're going because we are getting good feedback, positive feedback, but we're also iterating to just be, I don't know, like in the middle, in the sense of it has to feel centered for people and not forced. And I think that PEAK is making strides, that both our board and staff, this feels like the way it should have always been, and it's becoming normed. And I think that that is the hard work, but it does require a little bit of iteration. And when your staff aren't exhausted, they can think blue sky much more and think about what's possible around the work. And that's been another thing that's been beautiful to see is the innovation coming out of the team, the collaboration coming out of the team. It's hard to do that when you're just running on the treadmill by yourself because you're the only one doing a job. And so it is about transparency, good communications, investing in the internal tools, and having those internal dialogues with each other. I think those are some of the things that are so important. It can be done.
Ooh, absolutely. No, this is really, really helpful. And I see, these big areas you're talking about, building the foundation, like the importance of that. Like you said earlier, you can't even get to equity, you can't get to impact if people are broken down. So these practices of getting people hired, getting a team, that's actually exactly what you're saying. How are you going to ask people to take time off if there's not even enough time, enough people to know that you can feel comfortable during that time off? Getting people paid and getting and investing in these deeper conversations. I loved you mentioning the why, the knowing your why, being clear with your why, going in with the plan, going in with great questions, and being able to maybe go, what I hear is beyond what you may have thought was going to come from this. That openness to the possibilities of, and this is what I've loved doing this work too, is when you're creating something that does not exist, that has not existed. So many people fear, and we had a conversation about this a few weeks ago around that transition being scary of the unknown. And I want to welcome and call you into another perspective of that unknown being an endless possibilities of, because of that unknown, there's so much richness. And when you are in alignment to these values, there's so much more that can come from them. And this is such a clear example of, you led with that. You led with your why, and it led you down to something much bigger than you even imagined. And having that transparency, openness, flexibility, and alignment throughout the journey is the common thread that no matter what your project is, folks that are listening, to call you in, no matter what your project is, when you're leading in that way, this is what can happen to it. I do
It's all
want to
about
acknowledge.
abundance, Manuela. It's all about
Mhm.
abundance. So much of this work, even when we think about foundations spending their 5, 6, 7% a year, it's not based on what happens if in a single year we spent 30%
Mhm.
of our endowment and really really got under that big issue that we say our dollars are supposed to fund. But a lot of this is just productivity. I just want to call out the unlearning,
Mhm.
right? That has to be, because in the intro you talked about learning. I'm not necessarily learning. I've been an exerciser and a this and a this and a this. Have I been focused on wellness? No. And so what I'm doing is I'm unlearning. I'm shedding that a Black woman must be productive or else she's lazy or not ambitious or not clear enough on her path. These are things that I've had to contend with in the background, that my family, people I know, have contended with, especially people of color and women, right? It's just like a day off, like, oh, it's like my mother would be like, what? You have a day off? It's Wednesday. I'm just being
Yeah.
honest. Like, I'd be like, I'm off today. I took a day. And even my mother, it took me a long time before she passed to kind of talk to her in plain language about the equity goals, the racial equity goals, the healing, how work has been harmful. But when I started talking about like harm and work and stuff like that, she could get it. Right. When I was saying some of the race forward dictionary terms, that wasn't resonating with her. But she grew up in a place where you are always doing, or else
Mhm.
you're labeled as something. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, even explaining that to her, like, I'm not sick, nothing's wrong, I haven't lost my job, it's just
Yeah.
a Tuesday, mom. That was really hard for her to
Yeah.
kind of conceptualize that her children had gotten to a place where we could actually have a day off during the week and nothing was
Mhm.
wrong. So let's talk
Mhm.
about that, right? That's in our family, that's in our
Mhm.
DNA, in our friend
Mhm.
systems. And so if that's there, come on, work. It's a process, and you just have to be willing to
Mhm.
just keep pushing at it. But you're doing so much unlearning,
Mhm.
you're shedding some practices that you picked up along the way that definitely in an equity focused space no longer serve you. But
Mhm.
I was the one putting that productive lens on myself. And so I also had to take it off and say, you're doing enough and you're doing great work
Mhm.
and you're asking for help and you have a great team, you have great people around you, great network, you're doing enough. That not feeling like I deserve something, but that I've earned it, it's like really
Mhm.
weird, the earn and deserve. That one really trips people up sometimes. But it's like, no, I have had to really stop thinking about who I am as a professional in that lens that got created when I was 25. And that
Mm,
has been the biggest thing, is listening to the team too, about the unlearning and letting go of perceptions that have been driven deeply into us from a religious standpoint, from a community
mhm.
standpoint, from a family standpoint. And I think those are some of the fun conversations that we have when we get a chance to get in community with each other and retreat as a staff or cabal to really talk about some stuff. Um, we realize we're breaking norms, we're breaking patterns.
Yes, 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 yes. And I want to call into the difference of doing this in a space that is not rooted in shame.
Correct.
How important it is that this is everything that you're saying when we're talking about trauma, when we're talking about intergenerational trauma. This is work that we are carrying, and that again is so normalized within our culture. So if you are feeling this way, if you have these feelings, this is normal and it's okay. And also, it does not have to be the same way you have to continue. You can choose to think differently. You can choose to embody something differently that is now serving you. But we have to make the conscious choice to say, I want something different, because I love what you said, because I deserve this. I did not just earn this. Oh, there's so much richness there. I do want to make sure that we speak a little bit on the sabbatical program, but I want to come back to this conversation in just a moment. I want to give folks time to listen to you talk about what you've learned about implementing the sabbatical program. And it's the title of our session. And it is, I'm sure, what people were really interested. So what have you learned as you've been implemented? I know we talked a bit about it's been about a year. We've had a few rounds of people going in on sabbatical. Do you want to share a bit about that implementation, and also now where you're at with what you're transitioning, right? Because this is an evolving journey with well-being constantly.
Well, I'm going to be a bit concise, and I hope that people will link out to me, go on LinkedIn, reach out to the team. But this was intentional and it was gradual, right? I talked about half day Fridays, early closes. We introduced a wellness close the week of Labor Day and the week of Memorial Day before the sabbatical. We started doing summer Fridays. They were half at first, and then we started doing summer Fridays. And so I'll just say you can't just be doing like regular PTO and then go to sabbatical. I guess you could, but there's steps, right? Because you also tie your practice to your values, right? Like sometimes you can pick up a practice and people will look at it and go like, oh, but you haven't fixed those other things yet. Or like you just went from one thing all the way to the other extreme, like working everyone into the ground. And now it's like, everybody take days off. So we
Right.
started changing like how many days people get and carryover. I mean, there was a lot of completely nerdy, not fun policy stuff, you all. Everybody has to understand we kind of built it. And we gradually, I think the wellness, the first time we were all off at the same time, that was light bulb city. Everybody was like, dang, this is amazing. And we announced it to the community, and then we announced it again. Announced again, we will not be responding to your email. There is no backup. You are good. You are a foundation. You've got all you need to be successful. But we gone, y'all. We gone for 1 week. So anyway, so when we did that, that was really a light bulb. And then Dolores Estrada, who I know you quote in your our COO, she went through Chief. And one of the discussions that just came up as she went through Chief was about sabbatical. And at one point, she had posted it was like a little graphic. And it was talking about how hard it is sometimes to do sabbatical programs. And they were just like, start easy. And it just said, like, it gave like 5 recommendations on how to start a sabbatical. And I sat with that for 9 months. 9 months just trying to figure out, given that we're also hiring so many people, it was like, okay, what is it? Is it what year? How many weeks? What is the whole thing, right? But all of our staff are all, we're all, we're not contractual. We are not hourly. When you have full-time staff that you are paying as salaried staff, you have to budget every year for them to come to work the whole year. So if they take 2 weeks off, you still budgeted to pay them a whole year, right? It's not more money. You're not saving money. You're not spending more money. You should be planning to pay for your staff and their benefits annually. What we're doing is giving them some grace and space in how they come to their work and take that time off. So I'll just say that there were 5 people I came up with based on what Dolores shared, Chief shared, and a lot of other. Dolores would just dump sabbatical information to me. She would just say, here, read this. And I was like, okay, simple. 4 years, the average nonprofit staff, it's like 3 to 5 years especially for small nonprofits. That's like maximum time that they're staying. So if you set a sabbatical at 10 years, there's rare that anyone will ever get that. And if you set a sabbatical plan where they have to do something for the organization while you give them time away, or it's unpaid, I mean, I can't, as well as I think I'm doing, I can't not have a paycheck every 2 weeks. I'm not there yet. And so it was like, yeah, I'll give you a sabbatical, but it's unpaid. So we were also looking at things that we thought did not live up to our values or our equity goals. And so we threw a whole bunch of stuff away. And what was left was, if our goal is to have staff tenure be 4 to 6 years, which is aligned with our board members 3-year terms. If 6 is our magic number, what's a good incentive? 4. So 4 years, you qualify for 4 weeks of paid leave that gets banked in, and you have 12 months to use it as use or lose, and you can't walk with it. So if you resign after you get that bank, you can't walk with it. You will get your rest of your days. So there's rules, like, right? We didn't say, oh, everything's all up and on. No, it has lines. It's in a box. But it's a box written by the 5 people who qualified for sabbatical, which is what I love. So we started a draft policy, and then we gave it to them, and they began to shape it. We engaged we said, well, we probably need a feedback loop. And we probably have to think about what's the quiet week out and the quiet week back. What does it look like for someone to be really specific about taking their main assignments and moving them out of the way so that week before it's quiet, the week they come back in, all we're doing is just meeting with them. They're catching up on emails. There's no assignments. And so over time, we got enough feedback as the first person, the second person, third person. But I'm telling you, those people were all transformed on the other side. They were so zen and so like innovative. And what about this? And like everything was abundance and opportunity. So it wasn't just that PEAK figured out a way to really incentivize staff to really hit that 4 to 6 years. But also, I think because we didn't put any limitations other than the fact that we wanted them to take at least 3 weeks. That was the minimum you can take as a sabbatical, and you can take up to 6 if you choose. And so with that, I was just really, really excited about their feedback, and we stayed in feedback loop. And so we made a little bit of adjustment. And so from a policy standpoint, it was great to have them leading the policy. And then we were like, okay, we think this is really good. And we put it out to everyone. And then the staff have just done some, their own iterating. And so, and the person who has 8 years of tenure is getting a back-to-back to sabbatical. I was like, the rules is the rules. 4 years, you get 4 weeks. Well, she's going into her 8th year. So that meant that in 23, she got 4 weeks, and she's getting another 4 weeks. And I was like, that's the other thing too, is like, don't go trying to make up other side exceptions and stuff like that. The rules are the rules, and honor those rules. And I know that she's put in 8 years at PEAK Grantmaking. And so what harm will happen of doing this, right? We have to also ask ourselves, what are we so afraid of? Sometimes when we do good things for people, it's like we're always afraid something's going to happen bad on the other side. And so change is not always experienced positive, to your point. And you can give people a lot of change and it doesn't feel good, even if the change is supposed to be good for them. So I do think that PEAK is in a radical change cycle. We're very honest with each other that we are going to be changing quite a bit, but that it's all for the benefit, we hope, of our community, our members, foundations, and our staff. That is the goal. It is all with good intention, but we also have to keep asking, like, are we changing too much too fast? Trust me, when you ask a staff member, is the sabbatical and the wellness week, is this too much too fast? There's rarely going to be someone who says, oh yeah, it's too much. And so the key is we're just trying to be mindful of the balance of work and wellness,
Yeah.
because we also have these amazingly dedicated professionals, and they are
Mm,
giving PEAK their all. They're giving this community their all. And you don't want them to feel stressed out that there's this goodness coming at them, but they can't quite be and do what they need to do. So it's
mm,
really
mm,
forced collaboration, radically across the organization, communication channels radically. We document everything. And we remember that we're here for this community, and it's all about PEAK's reputation and brand. The more we
mm.
collaborate and communicate, any of us can step in on those assignments and accountability. And that has become a very beautiful thing.
Ooh, my goodness. And it sounds like to everything too, it's good to have good intentions, but you're aligning that with how you're preparing people to make sure they can do this work. And what is really critical to this is and we had a comment that came up of that quiet week out, quiet week back, like such a pure example of, it's not just about giving everyone all these great opportunities, but then really setting them up to be able to succeed in that week off, to not come back to that overwhelm of, well, I just lost all of the 1 week of Zen was just lost with everything that coming back, because how many times does that happen? And so there's two big things I want to highlight. One, that is the intentional actions you're making to make sure that folks are really being able to absorb it and do this work fully in this. But then what I love that I'm hearing as well is the not allowing the fear, releasing the fear of failure to come in. That
Absolutely.
this isn't about, and this is really important for all of us to think about, this isn't gonna, when we're creating, once again, when we're creating things that have not existed, there is going to be a lot of unlearning and learning that needs to be done. We are not going to have the answers right away. And as you know, I think you shared very vulnerably and honestly, and I'm sure there's so much more richness, I know there is, that we could hear about. But there's a lot of this that we're just going to be learning along the way. And so if we wait to try to be perfect and figure it all out, it's never going to happen. So even sitting in the 9 months of absorbing, that wasn't trying to be perfect, but being able to be thoughtful around everything. And then once you're doing it, also allowing things are not going to maybe work out the right way, but it's okay, because you're going to create, when you create the feedback loops, when you create the spaces to talk about the real honest conversations, the integration, like it will then continue to come. And seeing these big projects, when we're thinking about our well-being, what is at the core of our well-being? Us. And who are we? We are people. And what are we? We are deeply evolving every single day, physically, emotionally, spiritually. We are consistently evolving. So when we absorb these practices as living, breathing evolvement practices as well, and allowing them to grow and breathe just as we do every day, that's that power, that's that magic. That's where we're able to really see that, because we can continue to grow and not get stuck. And this is the only way that we can be. So,
Amen to
there
that. Amen
is.
to that, right? Because you're not going to get it right. I always quote Brene Brown saying, I'm not trying to
Mm,
be right, I'm trying to get it right. And that is a
mm,
big thing. And we haven't, the quiet week, to Rachel's comment, that was an evolution, but one of
mm,
PEAK's other principles is learn, share, and evolve. Sometimes just the learning is unlearning too. And the sharing is about the failure and the things that didn't go as planned, in addition to the ahas and what you learned. And then the evolution is that we all need to be open to the fact that life changes us every day, and not resist it, but try to get better at it. And the better is a group project. It's both you and, right. And so learn, share, evolve. That is where we have been. We're trying to practice and do some things different. I think we're trying to stay in radical alignment as a staff, with our board and with our community. But we also are disrupting and abandoning what
mm,
some of those expectations have been on us as an organization, to say that we can provide resources, we can drive equitable grant making practices for this community of foundations. But when PEAK is successful, foundations do better, but nonprofits are better off. And that includes PEAK when we do it right.
Oh, and you can see it. You're embodying it. Thank you so much. We're pretty much at time, but I do want to ask this last question because it's so important to me. But my last question for all of these wonderful guests that are joining me in this space is: living a life con fuerza is about reclaiming our inner power to live in alignment with our values. How are you choosing to live a life con fuerza? What does living a life con fuerza mean to you?
I think for most of my professional career, I've had to be many people, many personas, all these things to get through. And right now, living con fuerza to me is being one person, being consistent, uh, living my value of integrity, always, and just believing that I know I bring value to this space. So I think just belief, and not doubt is how I am trying to, as a human, be a person who's using herself as an agent of change and an agent of possibility and opportunity and as a model. And so for me right now, it is just about authentically being me and one and in alignment, and knowing that that's good enough for now.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Satonya. I'm so deeply
Thank
grateful
you.
to be here together with you and to share your wisdom and your growth and evolution with others. This is so, so special. We are at time. I did share and announce that I was going to share a very special announcement. So I'm going to do this very, very quickly to be respectful of our times. One of the very exciting privileges to have and hold space with so many leaders that are joining us in these conversations is the amount of resources that we are gathering. And so I'm officially launching the Con Fuerza Leadership and Wellbeing Resource Library. So for those of you who have been following the conversations and wanting to have access to more rich conversations about these topics, this is going to be a resource library available to all of you, where you can dive deeper into these topics. And each of the wonderful speakers that we have are going to be sharing resources to continue this evolution of learning and building awareness on these topics. So I will share these out and post these on LinkedIn as well. But we are time, and I do want to respect Satonya. Is there anything that you want to share out before we leave of how people can stay connected with you? I know there's a big event coming up.
We're heading to Seattle for PEAK 2024, our annual convening. We're 1,207, or I'll say 6 of my besties will all be there. We've got 500 people coming for the first time. Super excited about that. But PEAK is, go to our website. A lot of our resources are public. We are really just trying to be of service to this community of support, of motivation. We're trying to drive people toward change. And so anyone can reach out to me at any time. I have no gates around me. So please find me. And I want to just congratulate you on Wellness Wednesdays and all that you're doing. Having known you in your past professional self and seeing the joy that you are holding in this moment, I am so just deeply pleased to see you, being con fuerza yourself. So thank you so much. And it's been a joy to just watch this evolution in you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You've been such a pillar to this growth, and having you as a friend and leader to admire and see and be in community with. I'm just so grateful. So thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone who was here, who took the time to be here and chat and talk. And there's going to be more ahead. But yes, thank you all. And we'll be in touch, and we'll see you on our next Wisdom Wednesdays. Have a beautiful day, everyone. Thank you. Oh my goodness.